let's start out with a continuation of this morning's press conference on restorative justice. Not all of you covered it. The folks from your respective employers who covered it may or may not want to have these comments or find them useful, but there's something that I wanted to share at that press conference, and it has to do with the issue of restorative justice, and it has to do with the question of recidivism. Last year, we did an analysis of young adults up to age 25 and looking at disparity in arrest records and looking at the challenges we face in bringing corrections to and improvements to the existing criminal justice system. One of the things that we noticed was there was a significant difference in regards to recidivism among whites and African Americans. Another thing that we noticed was that those with access to various services, whether it was consulting, whether it was restorative justice programs, were likely to do better. And another thing that we noticed was that quite often young people who were likely to be ignored by the system, and by that I mean instead of no counseling, no alternatives, but instead just paying a fine, were to be dismissed, sent out the door, only to re-enter it at a future date. And so when we look at this present commitment to work with the youngest offenders, ages 12 to 16, this truly may be an important step in rectifying the problems in our criminal justice system and halting the revolving door and the record of recidivism, which not only leads to increased arrests, but also arrests for more serious offenses. So with that, let's turn to the capital budget. I received requests for the 2016 capital budget totaling almost $200 million. The property taxes necessary to service that level of debt and the costs of operation is simply not sustainable. As a result, I had to make cuts of almost $70 million in those requests, leaving us with a focus of a few key criteria, which in the end did not result in much flexibility in putting in important programs for the city, and particularly programs that I've tried to develop over the last four and a half years. This is a very frustrating outcome, having attempted year after year to bring financial stability to city budgets in the hope that we could make new investments in activities and projects that would lead to a more sustainable community, a more inclusive community, and one which would open the economy to every Madisonian. But the project limitations meant we had to first continue projects that were already under construction. We couldn't leave them half done. There are projects which we receive federal funds, and to not continue and complete those projects and to give up the federal funds would have long-term disastrous financial consequences. There's, of course, critical infrastructure needs. And lastly, I wanted to make sure we made investments in improving racial equity and social justice in allocating city resources. The general obligation borrowing in this budget recommendation is $14 million less than the 2015 capital budget. And it would be $24 million lower if short-term TID 25 debt is excluded. However, many projects have to be delayed and are not included. They include neighborhood centers, public safety facilities, the reconstruction of Monroe Street, a project that I've worked very hard to see completed, the public market, and a biodigester. These projects are important but need to be balanced against the overall city priorities, including our debt service, which has been a major issue for the last half dozen years. Now, what is included in this budget would be our commitment to $6 million for affordable housing to meet our long-term goals associated with Housing First, to house low-income families, chronically homeless individuals. Included is a new park shelter for Penn Park, the reconstruction of McKenna Boulevard, which in its present form is a very dangerous crossing for hundreds of children, many low income, making their way to Elver Park. There's a first step in here of $350,000 for healthy food development in underserved neighborhoods. We must, for reasons of health and safety, ensure that every neighborhood has a walkable, local, fresh food outlet. Included is $140,000 for a full-length basketball court at Allied Drive. Other program priorities, many of which are in the categories I described earlier, related to ongoing projects that need to be completed. Almost $8 million for the public safety radio system, almost $5 million as a first step towards renovating the landmark municipal building, which we own and which is in dangerous condition and badly in need of repair and restoration. Almost $2 million to meet the challenge of the Emerald ash borer. $600,000 in our ongoing efforts to create a cooperative business enterprise system in Madison. And even though it's lower than I'd committed in previous years, we are probably still the city with the strongest and deepest commitment to developing cooperative business enterprises involving worker ownership. $10 million as a first step for the satellite bus maintenance and storage facility, which is so critical to keeping our public transit system in good repair. And keep in mind, we've got already a significant number of buses that do not fit into the existing facility. And this is one item that is contingent upon federal support. We may well know the condition of our grant application before final adoption of this budget, in which case we can make appropriate changes depending on the outcome. There's a modest capital budget commitment as a first step towards the construction of a new Penny Branch Library. There is the already examined and studied $25 million commitment for the new parking ramps as part of the Judge Doyle Square project, something that'll be needed whether the present proposal goes forward or not. And we're continuing with the $1.5 million commitment for starting block, which is important to Madison's economic future. There is the continued commitment for bicycle paths, and within all these projects is a respect for the people who pay the bills, the people who expect services, who don't ask for too much, and a commitment to future generations as we continue to wrestle with the real challenges of rising debt service. If you look at the handout, I believe it's on page no, I don't believe it, but I'll find it. On page, is it either 11 or 12, where you have the graph of debt service projections. Now, the graph itself already starts off the top. And by that I mean our debt service should be at 12 to 12.5%. And as you can see, we're starting at 13.5%. The red line, which goes upward of 21.5% based on the adopted capital budget from last year, is totally unacceptable, irresponsible, unsustainable, and will not meet the city's goals of equity and justice. I've done my best to lower that line, and you can see it in the lowest line, which keeps us under 17%, 17.5%, which is still unacceptable. But this is all the product of years and years of thinking that by including everything in the budget, we're making everyone happy. Well, including everything in the budget, particularly the long-term budgets, the capital improvement plans, projections, now puts us in a situation where these kinds of cuts are absolutely necessary. So with that, I'll be glad to take any questions.
How do you expect the council will take the budget?
I don't know. They have not taken such proposals well in the last 4 years. And on the one hand, there's no reason to believe anything should change for 2016. On the other hand, the situation is more serious than ever, and so perhaps reality will set in. Somebody has to be responsible around here.
Last year you didn't end up signing the budget. What changes to your budget right now would cross the line to make you not sign it again?
Anything significant in a change here will certainly draw a veto. No question about that. A repeat of last year will get a veto.
Do you think Alder DeMarb's efforts to sort of change how the budget process is, how people get the information about it, will help with that?
I take heart in the effort of Alderwoman DeMarb to get the council better educated and informed about budget decisions and the consequences. That is optimistic, but I really don't see what's changed in that all of the information that was digested and presented this summer has been repeatedly presented over the last 4.5 years.
What's your reaction to the vote last night on the institution of the loitering ban here at the City County building?
Let's deal with that when we're done with the budget discussion, but I'll be glad to answer that later.
So previously, a year ago, you were looking at Midtown in, I think it was 2017.
I wasn't.
And following the budget discussion, so now why move that out all the way to 2022? Because it was in the capital budget.
The
previously.
city council moved it up along with other projects. Well, as a consequence of moving other things up over the last several years and constantly trying to make the budget a document that made everyone happy without any real grasp of the financial limitations of the people of Madison, it is necessary to push so many of these projects out into the future. It's not just a police station, it's a really critical neighborhood facility we had hoped would exist on the east side. It's a fire station. It's the public market, which in my view, in terms of the future economy of this community and its robust nature, to make sure we have an inclusive economy and inclusive recognition of health. All of those have suffered.
If it passed with all the wish lists, why don't you try and enumerate how it would play out? What is the worst case scenario? What happens?
Well, worst case scenario would be an adoption of a budget that clearly exceeded the limitations in what I've presented and would not properly prioritize recognizing what I outlined in terms of we don't want to squander federal money, which is so scarce. We have to complete projects which are partially under construction. We have to recognize that the capital budget must more accurately reflect the needs of a diverse community.
And if that were to occur, bond ratings get downgraded. I mean,
Well, our bond rating, I met I met with the people who are responsible for our bond rating a couple of weeks ago. Our revenues are strong in regards to the property tax. We have a healthy property tax base that continues to grow. It's not filled with dilapidated and deteriorating improvements, buildings, as you see in other cities. I mean, the worst case of that is Detroit. There are a lot of variables that go into a bond rating. One of the most significant is the ratio of debt service to the overall operating budget. That has been our strength for over 40 years. It's not a disaster, but it's not the strength it once was. In the meantime, there are other criteria that go into determining a bond rating, and the addition of all of the new housing construction and office construction we're experiencing certainly helps us. It helps our ratios in regards to size of property tax base to the size of our operating budget. It helps in regards to our value per capita. So we've still got some other variables. You know, it's sort of being a five-tool baseball player who's got a great batting average, scores a lot of runs, drives a lot of runs in, steals a lot of bases, hits a lot of homers. Well, our batting average has dropped significantly, but we're still doing all right in these other categories. Whether or not they will be adequate to sustain us, I can't answer. I can tell you that if we get to 17, 18% we'll be hitting like Rob Deere.
Obscure reference.
For those of you who don't know, Rob Deere could manage to hit 170 in a season and hit 25 home runs.
How much of the proposed Judge Joe Square project would come from general obligation borrowing?
I can't tell you that without looking at the document. I can't do that off the top.
Why is it, I know you had said you wanted to delay the vote on the Judge Doyle Square.
Yes.
Why is that?
Because we don't have an acceptable agreement. I mean, I would have to recommend that the whole project be turned down if we were to have a vote tonight. Let's understand something. I truly believe that this project would be a great asset to the city, and that if we had difficulties in negotiating a final agreement, those difficulties would revolve around the numbers, the various cost items, the various division of responsibility in terms of expenditures. That part is sound, but we don't have two critical items. We don't have the labor agreement, and we don't have the agreement that if the hotel is not constructed within a reasonable period of time, the title to the land reverts to the city.
And so do you think we can get that figured out in the next 2 weeks?
There's not a lot to figure out. We know what we need. If we don't get it within 2 weeks, I assume we don't have a project, and we go back to working on two separate projects. One would be the hotel parking lot on this site, and the other is to do our best to ensure that Exact Science builds somewhere in the city of Madison.
Why do you think you're continually, I mean, this is an ongoing issue with you, that this debt service, I mean, is the council just saying, it's a chicken and little thing, the sky is not falling? I mean, is there any?
You can't argue with the numbers. The numbers that we projected and predicted 4 years ago have turned out. The challenges have not gone away. They've gotten as large as we suggested, and it's more or less, like wandering out on a recently frozen, recently frozen lake. As you go further and further away from shore, it's getting thinner and thinner, and eventually you're going to fall in. Is that it on the budget? In regards to the City-County Liaison Committee, I'm pleased with their decision. Have we solved all the problems? Obviously not. Our biggest challenge is to tell the truth about this city's commitment to affordable housing and what we are doing in terms of the millions of dollars that are in this year's budget, that we're recommending in next year's budget for our Housing First commitment, the construction of hundreds and hundreds of units. There's the millions of dollars of support services that we provide. And as I've outlined since 2011, there are a significant number of people arriving in this community who have severe mental illness and substance abuse problems, and those statutorily responsible are obviously not doing a sufficient job. The dangers to the community cannot go ignored. I can't believe that elected officials get up there and totally ignore the sexual assaults, the fights, the knifings, the discarded hypodermic needles in areas where children play, the feces and urine in places where people eat. It's just unacceptable. And as we've learned from the accounts of other cities that have our same challenges, which include not yet having enough permanent housing to completely ensure that everyone is off the streets, you can still have rules of behavior which says, thou does not rape, thou does not knife thy neighbor.
Are you at all concerned that some of these other cities that have instituted or proposed these sort of same loitering bans have been challenged in the courts?
One of the beauty of our open system and democracy is that we can tell the truth. The U.S. Justice Department did not take a position that banning someone from sleeping in a public space was unconstitutional. What they said was that it is unconstitutional if there is no place to sleep. Now, number one, our proposals apply to a limited geographic area. They do not apply at night, and there is room at the inn. There is room at Porch Light.
We talk to homeless people and advocates. The thing that they keep bringing up over and over is we need a wet shelter. I'm not even sure what that is, but
What they're saying is the principles of Housing First. And we are the ones who brought it into the budget. The principle is that in terms of permanently solving the challenges of intoxication, people need housing. So therefore, you do not make it a requirement that before you get into housing, you must be sober. And this is how Housing First works in Arizona. It's how Housing First works in Utah. It is how Housing First works throughout the country, which is people are admitted to the housing, and then we deal with their most severe issues of substance abuse and of mental illness. But the corollary to that is not you ignore those things until they're housed. That doesn't mean it's open season on any behavior and any consequence of that misbehavior. As I've discussed it with two psychiatrists, with the exception of schizophrenics, the vast majority of mentally ill people can live with rules and responsibility, and in fact, not having them is in the worst interest of those people. But we got homeless advocates in this community who don't grasp that principle, don't get it. All they can do is express a need for a society with no rules, no consequences, and that is undermining everything we're doing, particularly our desire to make Housing First work. Because one of the toughest things to do is to convince the chronically homeless, particularly those with mental illness and substance abuse, to move into the housing. And so the longer this goes on, as the housing's completed, it'll be even tougher to get them in there. And that's evident from what we're experiencing now. A number of folks on the steps of City County Building have been offered housing and refused it, and those who did accept it either deliberately or unintentionally sabotaged it and got thrown out because of very dangerous behaviors.
Earlier, you were laying out some of the issues that have been going on down
Sure.
here on the steps and in this area. A lot of what you said sounded like illegal activity. Why can't it just become a legal option? Like have the police respond to these activities?
Because it's also a function of group dynamics. And what we want to do is prevent this before it occurs. And it's very difficult to do that in the present environment. I mean, you know, when somebody within the group pulls out a knife, when we get someone who's recently arrived in Madison and they go over by the UW campus and attempt to rape a woman, what our obligation is to significantly reduce the probability of that occurring. And as one of the most successful operators of a program has told us, and it's been repeated and repeated and repeated, you're better off with 10 groups of 4 people rather than one group of 40. The collective behavior is going to escalate with the larger group, and that's what we've seen in terms of the violence, in terms of the threats to passersby. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure serving you.